I've wanted to react to this for a while. I've never had the time to get. I never had the time to get around to it until now. So I'm sure you guys all know that Nick Fuentes is a rabid racist and anti-Semite, also authoritarian, I believe, communist or socialist. He's not. I don't know if he's necessarily capitalist. And he's been very problematic. He's been growing in the right wing. I've talked about him a bit on my channels, but I did want to react to this compilation of Nick Fuentes being racist, authoritarian, and extremely problematic because some people, first of all, he likes to present himself as being a lot more harmless than he truly is. And I take issue with that. I take umbrage with that because he's being deceptive to his audience. For years, he's been telling people to be racist, to that he supports Hitler, Nazism, and all of that. And those people are starting to be in positions of power now, right? We saw that sort of exposed with the whole group chat scandal. And now he's acting like he's some just like normal middle of the road right-wing conservative. No, that's not true. And I think that this compilation, compiled by Roan, I believe, which I remember from when he was collabing with Destiny, I believe. So I think this should be fruitful.
We're saying, hey, we want a Christian government. We want a Christian government. We want a majority white country. We want nationalism. We're okay with authoritarianism. We're not ideological. These are the things we want. And
by the way, I mean, not me. I don't know why I have to say not me. Because no one would ever mistake me. No one with a thinking mind and critical thinking skills would ever confuse me with a supporter of Nick Fuentes. I'm barely a supporter of Donald Trump, if that. I support Trump on many issues and things, but at the end of the day, I do think that his second term has not been nearly as good as his first. But so that definitely puts me miles away from wherever the heck Nick Fuentes is right now.
We're going to call out people that are betraying those things. We're going to call out the phonies that pretend to represent those things. We're like the immovable right-wing force in politics.
But that's why we need dictatorship. That's unironically why we need to get rid of all that. We need to take control of the media or take control of the government and force the people to believe what we believe.
So he's, whoa, that's insane. That's actually insane. So he wants to get rid of free speech, control the media, and force people to believe you can't force people to be Christians. That's not how Christianity works. And that's the key reason why I oppose a Christian state. A Christian state, I think, would be perfect if everyone in that society was Christian. But they're not, right? Christians huddling together and making a circle with Christian rules. No, that's all fine and dandy, but that doesn't work in a government where you have, for example, children who have Christian parents but might not end up being Christian themselves. That's not fair, or accurate, or true, or right, or just. So a church is what you're looking for. If you're looking for a group of people together to come together as Christians and make some Christian rules for themselves, you're looking for a church. Or heaven, but you're not looking for a kingdom on earth. Look, when Jesus was here on earth, he didn't say, oh yeah, bro, I'm king. Let me make a Christian nation and rule over everybody. He could have died on the cross for our sins, come back to life, and then done that. But he didn't. Why? He said his kingdom is not of this world. It's not. And so when we try to make a Christian nation, that kingdom is going to be our kingdom. It's not going to be God's kingdom. And the kingdoms of men always fall. So, Nick Fuentes can think that he's, being righteous or whatever, but these sorts of efforts are always doomed to either fail or end up in dystopian totalitarian states that are ironically hellholes.
Or force him to play by our rules and reshape the society. This is why it's Christian nationalism. We need a government of Christians. Tell me why we need people in government that don't serve Jesus Christ. Is that the argument? Well, here, Nick, here's why we need Jewish people in government that don't serve Jesus. Sorry, you're never going to win that argument. And Jewish people can be here, but they can't make our laws. We have got
Wait. He contradicted himself, right? Because he says he wants a Christian nation with only Christians, and he wants to force them to believe what they believe. But then he says that he doesn't want Jewish people in government, but he wants them to be citizens. Now, maybe he's saying Jewish by ethnicity, not by religion. If he's saying Jewish by ethnicity, then I understand. It would be, a thing where it's all about the beliefs and not necessarily the heritage. Although I think that's not something he genuinely believes either.
Talk about the fundamentals of our worldview and what it would look like to build a society based on our distinct worldview. It looks like a society where women don't have the right to vote, and it looks like a society where boys and girls get married as teenagers and start having kids, and they don't use birth control, and they don't use contraceptives, and they have big families and a high birth rate, and it looks like women wearing veils at church, and it
Well, I mean, I am astounded that I even agree with him on one thing, which is like, got people maybe 17, but preferably 18, 19 years old getting married at that age rather than what's the average age of marriage now, 30? And having children, I think that'd be preferable. Now, I think that some forms of birth control are fair. Some forms of contraceptives are fair. Anything that doesn't cause an abortion, I think, is within the bounds of what should be permissible. And arguably, it's between, the people in the marriage to figure out how much birth control you use or whatever. But I do think that, it is good to have a high birth rate. It is good for people to get married younger rather than wasting years getting heartbroken and then waiting so long to have children that they can only have one or two. I don't, even if they want more, right? I just don't think that that's optimal. And let's say you only want one or two children. You can get married at 19, have those kids, and then they'll be out of the house by the time you're 50. And then when you're ready to retire, then you can go kayaking or do all the other things that you want to do. So it's like a win-win, I feel like, for getting married younger so long as you are getting married to the right person. But all the other stuff that he was talking about was wrong. What was he saying? He said women not having the right to vote. It's wrong. The having big families was fine. I think it's fair to use contraceptives or whatever, but having big families is fine. Women wear veils at churches. That's actually a rather surprisingly contentious theological belief. I'm not going to wade into that right now, but I will say it's not as cut and dry as being like, all women should just be wearing veils at church, because there've been some relatively nuanced interpretations of scriptures that lean in that direction. So I'll just say, check out some Bible commentaries, check out some YouTube videos from highly reputable theologians on that topic, rather than Nick Fuentes, of course.
Looks like women not being in the workforce. So that means
women should be not in the workforce. I do think that there are too many incentives for women to be in the workforce. Like, for example, the way that the housing structure is set up, for example, it makes it so that if you are in if you're in a household with two people, male, female, it is way more things are priced so that it's way more livable to have both people in that union working rather than one person working and one person staying at home. That's like the big thing. We need to make it back so that if you are by yourself, it's as livable for you to be able to work, have one job, and provide for your family as it is to have two parents in the home. It should be to the point where you can have two parents in the home. They both can be working, but one person's income goes towards the home, and and the other spouse works, and you can use that money for other things. And let's say one person loses the job, the other person can still provide for the family, give the family everything that they need, and pay for the housing. No, you can't do that in every part of America anymore. So there are some incentives that need to be changed. I do think women need to be allowed to work in the workforce, because women should always have that option to work in the workforce. What if you're married and you still want to work to have that extra income? Fair. What if you are, farther along in your career than your husband, for example, and you want to work outside the home just to, get the family the most money possible and still have someone at home with the children or whatever, then women should be allowed to do that. Single women, certainly should be working. So this idea that women should not be in the workforce at all is a little bit absurd. I don't know what he expects single women to do, especially single women who don't have parents in their lives anymore or relatives who can take care of them. It's like you can't just go find a husband that doesn't work.
Banning gay marriage is back on the menu. Banning sodomy is back on the menu. Banning contraceptives is back on the menu.
Not the contraceptives. I will say I would never advocate for the two prior things that he mentioned. Large part because especially on the second, there's some invasion of privacy concerns there. But I will say as a Christian, there are certain rules that people are proposing where it's like, you make this illegal, I'm not really going to be that upset about it, right? I do think that people need to tread carefully, and I may give some pushback, but if gay marriage is banned, am I going to cry? No, I'm not. I think that it's fair to be like, and I still think that it's the position that America is a secular society, so it makes sense for secular institutions such as gay marriage to be legal. Like I've sort of accepted that it makes sense for it to exist. But if you ban it, bro, I'm chilling. Like, what do you expect me to say? I'm a Christian. So I don't support it on a personal level and a religious level. If push comes to shove and you're like, oh, support this or support that, I will say, I'll support the side that gives you the most freedom. I probably wouldn't side with the people who actually want to ban gay marriage, but I'm not gonna push too hard against it.
We're having something like Taliban rule in America in a good way. We're having something like a Catholic Taliban rule in America. No, man, if Antifa were marching down the streets and they were waving the banner of Benito Mussolini or Francisco Franco, I'd be joining them. Oh, yeah? Well, the UN and the internet and democracy, okay? What do you think about that? You know what democracy is?
Whoa, so he hates democracy. Now, the one thing that's interesting about the whole Mussolini thing is that it shows his true colors. Nick Fuentes is okay with political violence if it's the side that he supports. And this is how it goes with a lot of people, especially the farther to the right or to the left that you get. Those people will always tell you that violence is bad. But then when the violence is in the favor of their political interests, they will always accept it. Well, maybe not always, but most of the time, they will accept it. So you got to be careful for people like this. Hypocrisy is very common because it's politically advantageous.
Okay, what do you think about that? You know what democracy has given us? Obesity, low rates of literacy.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone's fat because we have democracy. What is this clown doing? What are we talking about? What are we doing here? Are you serious? This is insane.
It's given us divorce, abortion, gay marriage, liberalism, pornography. That's what democracy has given us. Ghettos and crime and political correctness, diversity. Yeah, track record of democracy, not so good. Catholic.
No, people are using democracy to get these things. This is entirely the result of social movements. This is entirely the result. And I'm gonna move because I just realized just like I gotta clean here. But this is entirely the result of social movements. If your side is winning the social discussion of like, what should be legal, what should be illegal, what should be a right, what shouldn't be a right, you don't have this. You know what democracy also gave us? Democracy gave us slavery. And you know what we don't have anymore? Slavery. So you don't blame democracy for these institutions being in place. You have to be honest and understand the fact that these democracy only gets you something if you can convince the majority of people or a significant minority of people that it is the right thing to adopt politically. Right? That's how it works. So Nick Fuentes has looked at the situation and he's like, well, you know, these things I don't like have been legislated into existence. You know what the greatest thing to do is? Make everything an autocratic, authoritarian, fascist state, and then I can make everything the way I want it to be, and then everything will be fine, right? But that's not how it works, because you also have to leave wiggle room for the fact that you're not necessarily right. So because you're not necessarily going to be right, you shouldn't be making all the decisions, because if you're wrong and no one can stop you, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And that's a great thing about democracy, right? America was wrong about slavery. We instituted slavery. And then we were like, you know what? This is wrong. And then we changed our minds. Imagine if all the slave owners or whatever, the pro-slavery people on the South were like, had an autocracy, right? And they didn't have democracy, so no one could vote out slavery. But that would have been a disaster. Eventually, I do think long term, you would have had uprisings against the states, either of, you know, white people who oppose slavery going against America and destroying it. We did have the Civil War, but you know, at the very least, it wouldn't have been America breaking in half and then fighting. It would have been just the people against the government, and the government of America would have completely fallen. It would not have been a good situation. That is the type of thing that Nick Fuentes will get you.
Like autocracy, pretty strong record. Catholic monarchy and just war and crusades and inquisitions, pretty good stuff. Pretty good.
Hold on. So he's saying that the Inquisitions is an example of the Inquisitions in the Crusades, or is an example of a good Catholic autocracy. So I'm going to look up the Crusades. I'm going to look up the Inquisition. So hold on. It says it had their start in 12th century Kingdom of France. Okay, so he says that Catholic autocracies have a strong record, and he gave as an example the Inquisitions and the Crusades. Okay, so let's start with the Inquisitions. The Inquisition happened in the Kingdom of France. How long did that last? It lasted 1,000 years. Okay, that's you know what? That's actually not. Okay, you know what? It's actually not bad. It's not bad. You know, 843 to 1,848. It's not. That's not terrible. It's not bad. But it didn't last forever. Now let's look at the Pope. Let's look at the Pope. So, with the papacy. The papacy was Vatican City. Now, the Vatican City has lasted for a while, but what I want to say, so Vatican City established independence in 1929, so it hasn't been around even 100 years yet. What I will say about the Vatican City as well is that it has no power. Nick Fuentes has to acknowledge the fact that America is a first world state. I don't think there's any example of a first world state at the scale of America in the 21st century being a Catholic autocracy and being successful.
Good stuff. You got to recognize the fact that this is a godless country. I hate it. It's immoral, it's wrong, it's heinous, it's evil.
Leave. Go somewhere more religious, like Guatemala or Mexico. Bye, Fuentes. Go somewhere that has your values. You're mad about how secular America was. Well, breaking news, buddy. America is a secular state. Maybe it's more advantageous for you to grift here in America than go to a place that actually embraces all of the values that you support. Right? Like, I don't know, is gay marriage legal in Mexico? I don't even know if it is. Let me see. Is gay marriage legal in Mexico? Well, interesting. It took them a while, but they finally got gay marriage in 2022. So it took them a while, but they did. Now, hold on. Is abortion legal in Mexico? Because I'll say say this. Look. So abortion is legal in the first trimester. I think, is that more restrictive than the United States? America's pretty liberal when it comes to abortion. But I'll say this. Culturally, Mexico is not nearly as far along down the progressive down the progressive path as America is. So if you want to stop or like establish a Catholic country, first of all, you get far less pushback in Mexico because Mexico is far more religious than the United States of America. Is far more Christian or Christian, Catholic, whatever. But also, you know, they haven't instituted all the things that you've got in the United States. I don't know what's the state of trans rights in Mexico? Probably non-existent. You certainly probably don't have many trans surgeries happening down there. So leave and go somewhere that embraces the values that you support.
But this is an evil country. And I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but there is simply no evidence that there is a silent majority. There is no evidence of this.
What?
There are too many non-white people in the country, frankly, for that to be the case. The country's 40% non-white, and like 80% of them are liberal, okay? And out of the white people, it's like 60-40. You do the math on that. There's not enough of us, okay? Now, that's not a total black pill because this isn't a democracy, and we don't want it to be. And so it's not the end. There are other ways, and I can elaborate on that later if people want me to, but that's a whole...
And one thing that's interesting, I will say, is that but the majority of people that I see who oppose democracy never support it due to politically principled grounds. Like, they're never like, oh, you know what? Because democracies are so fantastic. Everyone loves democracies. We should just do that. It's never that. It's always, I am mad at the policies that people have voted in through democracy. I see this a lot with all of the women who say, you know, that women shouldn't be allowed to vote. They're literally all conservative women. Literally the only reason that they're saying that women shouldn't be allowed to vote is that they agree with men on political and social issues. The only reason. So it's literally all just I want to get the result that I want. It's not, this is actually the best thing for society. Well, in a way it is, because they're like, whatever I want is the best thing for society, but it's just, I mean, they're purely acting and advocating for things out of political self-interest rather than, you know, well thought out political principles.
Other discussion, really. But the point is, when you look at these things like abortion, it's popular. People like abortion, hate it, but it's true. And you can thank the Jewish media for that. Abortion's popular.
Oh my goodness.
Sodomy's popular. You know, being gay is popular. Being a feminist is popular. Sex out of wedlock is popular. Contraceptives.
I will say some of that's dying down. Also, contraceptives are goated. So I mean, I'm gonna push back on Nick Fuentes hard on that one.
It's all popular. That's all.
But I will say this is what happens when you give a Catholic a microphone and they start talking about relationships. All right, so you know it comes with the territory.
Say it's good. That's not to say I like that. Popular means the people support it, which they do. And it sucks, and it is what it is, but that's why we need dictatorship. That's unironically why we need to get rid of all that. We need to take control of the media or take control of the government and force the people to believe what we believe, or force them to play by our rules and reshape the society.
So, and I just want to pause it here because I want to say, whenever you hear Nick Fuentes speaking more moderately, just remember that these are the positions that he has been espousing for years on end. And these are the positions that his supporters support. So even if he was to turn on a dime and say, you know what, I've got the same politics as Mitt Romney, it would not change the mind of his voters because he's already set their minds on fascism.
You know, the reason I wouldn't call myself a white nationalist, it's not because I don't see the necessity.
Yo, is that Richard Spencer, bro? I think he stopped pretending that he stopped being racist, didn't he? I think.
for white people to have a homeland and for white people to have a country. It's because I think that kind of terminology is used almost exclusively by the left to defame. And I think the terminology and the labels that we use, I don't think we can look at them outside of the context of their connotations in America. Whereas maybe it might be descriptive to call somebody a white nationalist. I think it sort of loses something when an average person hears that, and it's almost synonymous with Nazi or villain or whatever. And so I would say I'm a white person. I'm conscious of my white identity, conscious of nationalism. But I think in a way it's almost redundant to say that you're a white nationalist. We know that the word nation almost implicitly talks about ethnicity and biology. If you go back to the history of the word, a nation is not synonymous with country or state. Nation itself means a people. So I think if I call myself a nationalist,
Isn't it both, bro? Isn't it both? You can't have a nation without a government. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? When I look up definitions of things, one thing I like to do is I like to go to the Wayback Machine and go back to like the mid 2000s, because there's a lot of definitional slide that happens where things change meaning over time. Or people will co-opt things like Wikipedia entries to fit their agenda or beliefs. But here, this is from 2007. It says, one of the most influential doctrines, the list, what in the world? This is like the worst written. There's no way this has to be a vandalized version of the art. One of the most what? There's no way that this is legit. It's like the worst written Wikipedia article I've ever seen. Let me go forward. Okay, here it is. Contemporary definitions of the word nation often focus on the idea of a country or a sovereign state. Nevertheless, the term has historically referred to a community of people who share common history, language, culture, ancestry, or territory. That's fair. So tribes, don't always have like the most rigid governments, but they do count as nations. So I kind of get that. It's historically, though. Colloquially, nation means country or sovereign state, right? And generally, you're not going to keep control of your land very long if you don't have some form of a government, either a government or a defense force that can protect that land.
It's almost implicit in that word that it's, America does have a heritage of being a European country. So that a little bit about the wording, because I know a lot of people...
Doesn't America have a heritage of being Native American? But yeah, sure.
Would be confused by that, but that's really how I see myself.
This is why it's Christian nationalism. We need a government of Christians. We need a conservative movement, a nationalist movement led by Christians that obey the Bible and obey God and serve Jesus Christ. Tell me why we need people in government that don't serve Jesus Christ. Is that the argument? Well, here, Nick, here's why we need Jewish people in government that don't serve Jesus. Sorry, you're never going to win that argument. You're never going to convince me that we need people in government that don't serve Jesus Christ, the Son of God. You'll never convince me of that. Insofar as there's one God and he has one Son and there is one way to salvation and one way to the truth.
You've also got to go through Mary, right? Because you're Catholic. Isn't that how that works?
Then that's the way that the people running our society and writing the laws need to be, and no other way. And that's not hateful and that's not prejudice. If anything, it's the opposite. You can only love your country if you want to have people running it that love God and love this world and love people. And the only people that are like that the only people as Christians we know that can be like that are fellow Christians. That's it. So this Judeo-Christian thing's got to stop. We don't live in a Judeo-Christian country, or at least if we do, we no longer want to live in that country. We want to live in a Christian country. We want to live in a Christian country with Christian rulers and Christian legislators and Christian judges and Christian law and Christians. And Jewish...
I feel like I don't really have anything to add to this because I've already condemned this portion of what Nick Fuentes has said, so I'm just going to keep it playing.
People can be here but they can't make our laws. If I take 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies and Cookie Monster has 15 ovens working 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years, how long does it take Cookie Monster to make 6 million batches of cookies? The math doesn't quite seem to add up there. I don't think you'd result in 6 million, maybe 200 to 300,000 cookies.
I'm not going to get into that because, you know, I don't know enough about the history of how many people died and how that was all counted. I think that argumenting on that point is rather stupid. You know, we know that, you know, Hitler and the Nazis murdered a whole bunch of Jews. You know, what is it cooler if it's 200,000 rather than 6 million? Like, no. So, like, you know, unless you're trying to make, well, we all know that he's trying to make Hitler seem cool, but, you know, unless you're trying to legitimize what Hitler did or make it seem like what he did was not as bad, there's really no point in quibbling over how many people actually died. Now, maybe if you've done a bunch of research and you found all the proof that, like, it was actually 200,000 people, even so, like, what's the point of dying on that hill? Right? You know, are you like some historian? You're trying to, like, even if you were, I don't understand what the point of that would be.
Jim Crow stuff, who cares? Oh, to drink out of a different water fountain, big fucking deal.
Would you say that me having sex with my dog is the same thing as me having sex with a black man?
No. But they would both be degenerate.
Oh,
I'm against race mixing.
That's crazy.
I would never do that. I would never do that. 9 in 10 blacks vote for Democrats. Why do they do that? God only knows. Why do they play the knockout game? Why do they punch white people in the street for no reason? Why do they rob 5 7-Elevens in 30 minutes?
Now, I think that he actually sort of exposed himself here. You know, I was talking about none of this is built on political principles. This is all built on political expediency and what's actually convenient. He led with the fact that 9 out of 10 black people vote for Democrats. Why? Because if 9 out of 10 black people voted for Republicans, he wouldn't care. If 100% of black people opposed gay marriage, opposed contraceptives, right, opposed women's rights, he would be on board with them 100%. So this is all a political game. This is all him trying to exclude various groups so that the only people who can influence various aspects of the levers of political power in the United States of America are people that agree with him. So that all of the rules are aligned with him. And he wants to try to rig the system to make it only be in his political interests and not in the political interests of the entirety of the United States of America.
Why do they walk around with their pants around their ankles? I don't know. I'm not black, so it's not my experience. It's unexplainable, but this is what they do. Okay, this is how they are. It is what it is. That black vote is locked in, man. It is totally inelastic. It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter what they believe or who they like. I mean, it just doesn't matter. So why would we create these opportunity zones and a platinum plan and just send the military in. Do what must be done. Send the military into these black neighborhoods. Make the streets safe. They'll complain about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're never going to vote for us. I'll just use whatever is at my disposal. So if Marjorie Greene came to the conference, I'm not going to say no. Because then everybody's talking about AFPAC 3, and they're talking about Russia, and they're talking about Hitler, and they're talking about white identity. So we instrumentalized her for that purpose, and it worked. We got what we were looking for. Nevertheless, it's still a problem. Like, women do not belong in politics. We can recognize that we're in a situation where we have to work with what we have politically, and then by the same token, like, never accept for one solitary moment that we would ever have any women in politics. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, I all along never accepted Marjorie Greene as a congresswoman, or Lauren Boebert for that matter, or any of them. I am also smart enough to recognize that me not accepting them does not make them not congresswomen, or does not make them not advantageous or beneficial in some way. And that's the approach that people need to have. That's why I say trust the plan a lot. Like, you need to afford me a little bit of leeway so that I can maneuver while understanding.
So now we see this game that he's playing, lying and pretending that he's just a normal conservative in front of everyone. He's like, oh, just give me a little leeway, man. You know, I got to do what I got to do to build the bridges I got to build so I can make the things I want to make. And then we can go back to the whole white power thing. Like, I hate this.
Fundamentally, there's no compromise.
If you're a right-wing guy and say, I want the most right-wing government that is like pure, and you take right-wing principles through to its logical conclusion, I want that. We're that. We're the immovable standard where, because it's true, whether it's the TV hosts or it's the politicians or it's the activists, they are constantly wheeling and dealing, thinking in terms of what's going to play with the voters, what's going to play with the independents, what's going to look good in front of the liberals, what's going to look normal, what's going to be palatable to women or something. And so it's always, that's why they're always being pulled to the left, because they're always looking for where areas to compromise, looking for concessions to give up. And we're the guys that are saying we will not move.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the right never tries to do this, and I don't know why. We have to try to use messaging that appeals to women, right? The only sphere where I've seen the right make appeals to women that use sort of the language that women understand is pro-lifers. And you know what happened? We overturned Roe v. Wade. So you can speak to women using things like the appeals to emotions and various things. Like, you can just throw stats at women and then expect them to vote for you. Like, that's just not going to work, right? You have to tell stories. You have to kind of break down more at a lower level, sort of what the effects of these things are. I feel like on the right, it's just a lot of men talking to each other about politics and then wondering why women are never voting with them, right? I understand that, yes, women are moving farther and farther to the left, but a lot of that is the fault of the people on the right who are not even doing anything to try to appeal to women at all, right? People are too busy being book smart and ideological that they're forgetting, or not even caring about how to relate to people. And that's just the fact. And until the right does this, then they will always be stuck playing second place, or at least having little brother syndrome, feeling like they're always behind or the underdog, even if they're not necessarily the underdog, because in 9 out of 10 issues, when it comes to politics, they will be on the unpopular end when it comes to women. You can also do things that appeal. It's not just a matter of just appealing to women, by the way. There are things that you could talk about that appeal to both men and women. So cost of living, for example. Everyone has to live, right? So if you speak to cost of living, everyone understands that. And it's hard to talk about cost of living in a way that doesn't appeal to both men and women, because cost of living is relatively basic and simple to understand, right? Regardless of how you think, regardless of you think more emotionally, regardless if you think just purely in regards to stats, whether you think purely in regards to political principles, no matter how you approach politics, when you're speaking about quality of life, you're probably going to speak about quality of life in a way that's going to connect with both men and women of all demographics, all backgrounds, all walks of life, and all perspectives. They may not agree with you, but at least they'll understand what you're talking about. There are many other issues as well, where if you broke things down to a lot of people in ways that they understand, then they would be like, you know what? Yeah, you've changed my mind. I've seen it happen occasionally in these like various, debates on the street with different people. But the thing is, those people who are debating on the street aren't the same people helming these very popular conservative talk shows or whatever. And some of these people who are changing people's minds are women. And where are their popular podcasts? Right? So we also need to take the people who are being successful and changing people's minds and giving them better platforms than people who haven't changed anybody's minds in decades, like Ben Shapiro, right? I'm not a big Ben Shapiro hater. I'm not a fan of his either, but I'm not a hater. But let's be honest, when was the last time he changed anyone's mind? What was the last big thing that he did for the conservative movement? Meanwhile, we've got Kristen, what's her name, with Pro-Life for America, Lila Rose, other people who are actively changing people's minds on cultural issues in favor of conservative and Christian values. Right? So he's looking at things on the wrong end, right? We've got democracy. What's going to be harder for you to do? Change people's minds by appealing to them in ways that they understand, or getting rid of democracy wholesale? He's supporting something that is radical, that is drastic, and not only that, is relatively unlikely to be successful.
We're not purity spiraling. We're not wackos. We're saying, hey, we want a Christian government. We want a Christian government. We want a majority white country. We want nationalism. We're okay with authoritarianism. We're not ideological. These are the things we want. We're like the immovable right-wing force in politics. I've always said we're like the right-wing flank of the GOP. And you're absolutely right. That's why the left is so successful, because they're leftists. And they're going to work every day to fight to make the government left-wing. The right-wing people are not even really rightists at all. The people on TV, the conservatives, they're just literally not even down for the cause. Like, that's for openers. We are. I hear these guys like John Doyle and them, they say, well, we're just normal. Like, we just want to appeal to, like, normal people. You know, you can't care about those things. We have to be radical. Like, we want to be the new normal, which is...
Oh, yeah, I didn't even know that John Doyle was radical, until recently. I used to watch John Doyle. Was it Heck Off Commies, what he had? Used to watch John Doyle, like, what, 9 years ago, was it? It was a while ago, back when he had the logo that was ripping off Yahoo. It was quite a while ago. And... I thought what he had to say was interesting. I thought maybe it was a little farther right than where I was at. But then I stopped watching them because his videos were too long. and I've always kind of been like, what happened to John Doyle? And then like a few years ago, I went back and I can't even remember if he was still making videos. But if he was, they were too long. And I was like, yep, see, same problem, still there. Still, videos are still too long. So I haven't observed them, but I guess he actually was like a wolf in sheep's clothing there, which is kind of a shame because he was also quite funny.
Is going to be different in 20 years. So it's my favorite quote by Stalin. He says, will the system conquer the revolution, or will the revolution conquer the system? That's the endless tension, and we have to be the revolution.
Fuentes isn't all bad, though. Sometimes he innocently plays Minecraft just like you or me. And that's what I like to tell my viewers as well. I do sometimes play Minecraft as well. And that's also not how you spell plays. I at least understand the language of English. But yes.
Look at that. Look at that little sheep over there. What a stupid idiot. Look at him. He's just standing there. Hey!
What? I don't get what that was supposed to mean. Comments are turned. Oh man, I wanted to read the comments. I wanted to read the comments on that one. I wanted to read the comments. I love reading the comments at the end of the videos. That's always fun, right? Brett Cooper gave me that idea. Like I was watching the comment section and I was like, oh, that's cool. I should do that. So I started doing that. So it's always sad to see that the comments have been removed. But yeah, I mean, hopefully after this, you sort of understand the problems with Nick Fuentes. Maybe you're not exactly where I'm at politically. Maybe you're on the left. Maybe you're Catholic. But at the end of the day, I think it should be obvious to see that building up an ethno-state, especially a religious ethno-state, is just not good. It's not smart. It's not wise. It's definitely not what Jesus would do. And so, yeah, it's the tension of him trying to do that while pretending or claiming to be Catholic or Christian is rather. It's got to be a taut tension there. I'm surprised that he's trying to straddle that fence, but what he's doing is successful for him. So, to be fair, I don't necessarily blame him for sticking with it. But I just hope that this is an alarm bell. I hope that this is an alarm bell to Christians and conservatives to be on the watch for this dude, push back on this dude, because if you don't, I think that he will take over the right. So, watch out for him. push against him. And for the people who are fans of him, they need to be expelled from the conservative movement as well. And I don't know about the Republican Party. Maybe not. Maybe that's too undemocratic. But I think, there needs to be an excoriation of anyone who's a fan of Nick Fuentes, because that is just way too far, and it is disastrous and destructive, not just for the conservative movement as a whole, but also for America as a country.